The Galaxy Council had always believed it understood every species under its rule. For centuries, it acted like the keeper of peace, the guardian of old traditions, and the voice of reason across the stars. But whenever humans entered the picture, the Council felt something it never admitted out loud: uncertainty. Humans grew fast, adapted fast, learned fast, and built faster than any species the Council had ever seen. And in the quiet halls of their grand chamber, some members whispered that Earth was becoming too strong too quickly. At first, it started with little remarks made in formal meetings. Human ships were exploring too many sectors. Human scientists were uncovering old secrets that other species had spent ages trying to decode. Human trade routes were expanding so fast that entire economies had become dependent on Earth. It is natural for them to slow down, one representative said during a closed meeting. If they rise too far, too fast, we may lose our balance. But over time, those whispers turned into something sharper. A few powerful members, the ones who had always struggled to keep order among rival species, claimed that humanity was becoming a danger. They painted a picture of humans as unpredictable, emotional, and impossible to fully control. Even though Earth had never broken a treaty, never invaded another world, and never threatened anyone, the Council convinced itself that humans would eventually challenge their authority just by existing. So they held a private meeting that excluded human representatives. They discussed Earth like it was a problem to be solved instead of a partner to be respected. The debate lasted for hours, and though there were voices who defended humanity, saying humans had done nothing wrong, the louder and more fearful side won. "It is settled," the head speaker finally said. "We must restrict them." The decision was pushed through without warning. When the announcement reached Earth's diplomatic station, it shocked every human inside the building. The message was cold and formal, almost insulting in the way it described humans, as though they were a wild species needing restraint. The Council declared that humanity would lose its rights to expand into new sectors. Their trade routes would be heavily taxed, monitored, and in some cases, completely blocked. Earth would need permission for ship movements that had always been free before. Even human research involving old ruins and ancient star systems would now require special approval, something that could take years. The ambassadors tried to request a direct meeting with the Council to discuss the sudden restrictions, but the Council refused. They claimed they were too busy with other matters. Humans knew what that meant. They had been deliberately pushed aside. For the first time in many years, the human delegation walked out of the Council chamber feeling powerless. As they traveled back to Earth, they replayed the message over and over, trying to understand what crime they had committed. But there was nothing. Humanity had only grown, explored, invented, and tried to build friendships across the stars. Yet the Council reacted as though progress was a threat. When the news reached Earth itself, the reaction was quiet at first. There was no panic, no shouting, no chaos. Instead, there was a deep, cold pause, like the entire planet took a single breath and held it. Humans were confused, hurt, and insulted. But more importantly, they were thinking. A species known for acting with emotion sat in an uneasy calm, trying to understand why they had been punished for simply being themselves. The human leadership gathered in a secure meeting hall in one of Earth's underground centers. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't argue. Instead, they listened to the ambassadors who had witnessed the decision firsthand. Every detail, every dismissive wave, every cold glance, every barrier the Council had placed was recounted. By the end of the report, the room felt heavier than gravity itself. "We did nothing wrong," one senior official said quietly. "But they treated us like we did." Another official leaned forward. "This wasn't a warning. It was a push. They want us to step back, slow down, and accept limits we never agreed to. And if we don't, They'll tighten the restrictions again, the official said. And again, until we can't breathe. Outside the room, everyday humans went on with their lives, but the mood around the planet shifted. People felt the unfairness deeply. Earth news networks replayed the Council's announcement, and citizens couldn't understand why a group that promised fairness acted with such disrespect. Many people whispered the same thing. Why would they treat us this way? Yet even in frustration, humanity did something that surprised many species who watched from afar. They stayed calm. No threats. No backlash. No loud demands. Humans simply gathered among themselves, quietly, seriously, and with purpose. History had taught them that rushing into anger never solved anything. So they prepared instead. In the following days, human ships began returning to Earth and nearby colonies. Scientists paused some of their outer projects and brought their research home. Trade leaders shifted their routes to avoid Council-controlled checkpoints. It looked gentle on the outside, like a simple retreat, but inside every action was a calculated step. Humanity wasn't stepping back because it was scared. It was stepping back because it was thinking. Across different colonies, governors were contacted and asked to attend remote strategy sessions. Old alliances between human settlements and independent fleets were quietly revived. Engineers began checking systems that hadn't been used in years, backup communication networks, old defense plans, hidden infrastructure built in the early days of space expansion. It was as though humanity had been waiting for something like this without even knowing it. The Council assumed humans would complain loudly and beg for reconsideration. But instead, humanity became silent and organized. That silence unsettled several Council members who sensed they had misread the situation. But instead of stepping back, they told themselves humans would adjust eventually. They believed humans were predictable. They couldn't have been more wrong. Weeks passed, and human representatives repeatedly asked to meet with the Council to talk through the restrictions. Each request was politely refused. "It is not the right time," the Council replied again and again. The truth was simple. They didn't want to face the humans they had wronged. During one internal Council meeting, an advisor hesitated before speaking. "Perhaps we should reconsider our decision." Humans seemed calmer than expected. "They are being quiet because they know we are right," another member said confidently. "They will accept our rules soon enough." "But what if they don't?" the advisor asked. "They will." The Council believed its own words so strongly that it failed to notice how many of its systems relied on human-built structures. They did not realize how many worlds depended on human trade. They did not see how many species admired Earth's bold spirit. They believed humanity was alone, but the truth was far more complicated. Back on Earth, the planning grew deeper. Human analysts studied every restriction in detail. They assessed every weak spot the Council created by isolating them. They examined their own strengths and the Council's blind spots. And slowly, a single idea formed among human leaders: not revenge, not war, but a firm and strategic stand. Humanity would not attack. They would not threaten. They would simply show the galaxy that limiting them was the worst mistake the Council had ever made. Every plan was made with calm minds, not anger. Every decision came from unity. Humans knew that the galaxy already saw them as unpredictable. They understood how easily fear could turn into conflict. So they refused to play into that narrative. The truth was clear. Humanity wanted peace. But they would not bow to unfair rules. As human leaders finalized their plans, a quiet sense of determination spread through Earth. People went to work with purpose. Engineers built with focus. Scientists researched with new motivation. Everyone understood that humanity wasn't just reacting to restrictions. They were preparing to protect their future. By the time Part 1 ends, the Council still believes it has the situation under control. They think humans are stepping back, because they have no other choice. But if anyone stood close enough to Earth or its colonies, they would see something else entirely. Humanity was not scared. Humanity was not defeated. Humanity was simply preparing, because when pushed unfairly, humans always respond, not with panic, but with quiet, steady, unstoppable resolve. After the Council's restrictions, humans didn't react with anger at first. There was no shouting in streets, no demands to strike back immediately. Instead, people went about their daily lives with a quiet intensity, knowing something important was happening. Scientists continued their research, engineers continued their projects, and pilots continued their training, but everything was now done with more attention, more thought, and a new sense of purpose. Humans had a way of turning pressure into energy, and this was exactly the kind of challenge that focused them at the command centers across Earth and nearby colonies. Leadership teams began meeting in small groups. No grand speeches, no public announcements. They only spoke to each other, analyzing every angle, every decision the Council had made, every weak point that humans could turn into advantage. Unlike other species, humans didn't rush blindly into action. They studied, they planned, and they coordinated. Every movement was precise, quiet, and controlled. People started noticing small changes in their daily environment. Trade routes that had been simple for years were subtly rerouted. Ships that normally ran on autopilot now had human crews monitoring each course personally. Communications that used to be casual now ran through secure channels. On the surface, it seemed like minor adjustments. But the reality was that every human was now part of a larger, invisible network, preparing for the next stage without the Council knowing a thing. For decades, humans had quietly built capabilities that other species dismissed as ordinary or insignificant. Some of the colonies had older communication systems, kept as backups, that no one in the galaxy had thought mattered. Some fleets had been upgraded quietly, ship by ship, over many years, always under the radar. The Council had always assumed that humans were predictable. They had assumed that humans would complain, beg, or even submit when pushed. But humans had never been predictable. And now, every preparation, every quiet improvement, was about to show its worth as the world adjusted to the Council's restrictions. People began looking at each other differently. There was a quiet pride in knowing that despite being treated unfairly, humans were staying calm, smart, and united. Families, teachers, workers, and leaders all felt connected in this unspoken purpose. Even children noticed it. Schools started including lessons about teamwork, planning, and history, highlighting the importance of being clever and patient in the face of challenges. Humans understood that this was not a battle fought with anger, but with focus, preparation, and unity. Remote colonies began receiving special messages from Earth leadership. They weren't orders in the traditional sense, but rather coordination points. Check systems. One message reads simply, update communications, confirm routes, report anomalies. Every colony understood the meaning. Every fleet understood what was expected. Humans had created a chain that ran across space, linking every settlement, every ship, and every station in a quiet network of readiness. Nothing was obvious to outsiders. To the Council, it seemed like humans were simply adjusting, retreating, or accepting their restrictions. They had no idea what was really happening behind the calm surface in laboratories. Scientists revisited research that had been shelved years ago. Some of it was technology others had thought outdated. Some of it was engineering techniques long considered obsolete. But humans understood the value of these systems. Small, overlooked technologies were now being optimized, upgraded, and integrated into larger plans. Humans had always been good at turning ordinary tools into extraordinary advantages. And this time, they were doing it on a scale the Council couldn't have imagined. Engineers and fleet commanders worked together to check every ship, every station, and every route. Even routine maintenance was treated like preparation for something bigger. Ships were being tested not just for travel, but for resilience, speed, and coordination. Pilots ran exercises, but unlike traditional drills, these were simulations that focused on strategy, timing, and precise execution. Each person involved felt like they were part of a larger story, part of a bigger plan that would soon take shape. It was a quiet kind of excitement, not the loud celebration of a festival, but a steady pulse that everyone could feel. Meanwhile, on Earth, leadership councils debated and discussed their next moves. Not one person suggested aggression or revenge. Every conversation focused on planning, strategy, and intelligence. They studied the council's patterns, past decisions, and even mistakes. Every restriction, every oversight, every assumption the council had made was being analyzed. Humans knew the key to their success would not be brute force or anger, but intelligence, patience, and careful execution. They studied their allies, they studied themselves, and they prepared to act when the time was right. Trade systems were quietly adapted as well. Humans understood that many planets and species relied on their trade networks, sometimes without even realizing it. Shipments were rerouted, supplies were prepared in advance, and every cargo route had backups. Trade leaders worked with scientists and fleet commanders, sharing information that was normally confidential. Humans had always been able to combine knowledge from different fields to solve problems, and now that skill became a critical advantage. No one outside the human network had any idea what was happening. To the Council, it still seemed as if humans were being patient and compliant. Communication networks also became a central focus. Humans had decades of experience in sending secure encrypted messages. Every colony, every fleet, and every station had access to a communication system that was invisible to outsiders. These networks allowed humans to coordinate quickly and quietly, sharing information about routes, supplies, and conditions in real time. The Council had never considered that humans could be this connected. They had assumed distance would slow Earth down, that delays and restrictions would create confusion. They were wrong. Even human culture shifted in subtle ways. Stories, art, and history that highlighted cleverness, patience, and resilience gained new attention. People shared accounts of past challenges and the clever ways humans had solved them. Children were taught about resourcefulness. Adults were reminded of focus and unity, and communities came together in new ways. The human spirit, already strong, grew stronger. And all of this happened without anyone in the galaxy noticing. Humans were quietly preparing for a moment they knew would come, while others assumed nothing was happening. Throughout all of this, there was a calm, almost invisible excitement in the air. Humans weren't panicked, and they weren't angry. They were alert, aware, and ready. The Council had expected fear, compliance, or outrage. What they did not expect was discipline, patience, and intelligence on a scale that could change outcomes without a single loud action. Humans had always been underestimated. That underestimation now would be their greatest advantage. By the end of these weeks, humans had quietly transformed their world and their colonies into a network of preparation. Ships were ready, communications were ready, supplies were prepared, and people were ready. It was invisible to the Council, but it was powerful. Humans had not responded to the restrictions with anger or rebellion. Instead, they had responded with intelligence, patience, and careful preparation. Every aspect of human life now had purpose connected to a larger plan. The Council believed they had suppressed humanity. They thought humans would accept limitations and gradually fade into compliance. But humans were patient. They waited. They prepared. And soon, the galaxy would see that. What seemed like quiet submission was actually the calm before the storm of strategy and brilliance that humans were capable of. Humans didn't just want to continue living freely. They were preparing to show the galaxy that when unfairly challenged, they did not panic, they did not complain, and they did not fail. They planned, they organized, and they strengthened every part of themselves quietly. The Council assumed nothing was happening. That was humanity's advantage. By the time the Council realized their mistake, humans would already have built the foundation for actions that would change the entire balance of the galaxy. And all of this had begun quietly, without anger, without noise, but with a focus and intelligence that no one else could match. After weeks of preparation, humanity began taking subtle actions across the galaxy. Nothing loud, nothing aggressive, nothing that would appear threatening at first glance. To the Council, it looked like humans were still adjusting quietly to the restrictions, complying and taking their time. But the truth was very different. Humanity was moving, quietly, carefully, and with purpose, using every advantage it had built over the years. Trade routes were the first area where humans acted. For decades, Earth had been at the center of trade networks, linking colonies, independent settlements, and neighboring planets. The Council had thought that by blocking certain routes and monitoring others, they could control human influence. But humans had already prepared multiple alternative paths. Every shipment was now carefully coordinated through routes that were invisible to outsiders, and backup supplies were ready in case any checkpoint became a problem. This allowed human traders and fleets to continue moving almost without interruption, even though the Council believed they had created serious obstacles. It was more than just trade. Scientists and engineers began running simulations and sending small exploratory teams to sectors that the Council had assumed were inaccessible to humans. Using their secret communication networks, these teams coordinated with colonies and independent stations to share data, map routes, and study resources. What appeared to be ordinary research or trade trips were, in reality, a quiet demonstration of human efficiency and planning. Every step had a purpose. Every action strengthened their position in ways the Council could not yet detect. Meanwhile, Earth's leadership worked closely with fleet commanders to ensure that every ship could move at maximum efficiency if needed. Training drills were upgraded to focus on precise coordination rather than force. Pilots practiced moving multiple ships in formation, timing arrivals perfectly, and avoiding detection when necessary. Engineers made sure every ship could operate under stress and handle emergencies. Humans were not building weapons to attack, they were preparing for everything else: speed, communication, endurance, and coordination. They wanted to be ready for any challenge without giving the Council the satisfaction of seeing them react in anger. Colonies played an essential role in this strategy. Leaders in distant settlements received secure instructions about maintaining operations while appearing routine. They continued trade, science, and daily life, but also ran hidden assessments, reinforced old systems, and strengthened communication networks. Everyone, from the engineers to the traders to the fleet coordinators, understood that they were part of a larger plan. Humans had a way of turning ordinary actions into extraordinary advantages. The Council assumed everything was normal, but humans were quietly proving otherwise. Human scientists revisited old technologies that had been considered outdated or unnecessary. Some systems had been designed decades earlier and left unused, overlooked by other species. Now, these systems were modernized, improved, and integrated into the current fleet and colony operations. Humans had always been skilled at repurposing tools, finding hidden potential in ordinary resources, and creating solutions where none seemed to exist. This quiet ingenuity was part of what made humans unpredictable, and why the Council had misjudged them for so long. As weeks passed, the quiet momentum continued. Humans were not making public announcements. They were not sending aggressive messages. And they were not complaining about the Council's restrictions. Instead, they communicated in small, precise ways with those who mattered, their allies, their fleets, and their colonies. Information flowed through hidden channels that no one outside their network could access. Every report, every adjustment, every decision was carefully coordinated. Humans understood the value of planning, and patience was their greatest weapon. While humans prepared in silence, the Council continued to believe they were in control. They monitored known trade routes, watched for unusual activity, and assumed they could predict human behavior. They did not see the hidden routes, the secret communication networks, the quiet adjustments being made in every colony and fleet. They assumed humans were predictable, but humans had never been predictable. Every Council decision, every assumption they made, was quietly being tested and outmatched by human planning. Even in daily life, humans demonstrated focus and patience. Workers in factories and laboratories, teachers in schools, and families in homes all contributed indirectly to the larger plan. People created backup systems, maintained essential resources, and reinforced infrastructure. Every activity had a purpose. Ordinary citizens, unaware of the full scope of the strategy, still played their part simply by being diligent and attentive. Humans had a way of involving everyone, turning ordinary life into a web of preparation that strengthened the species as a whole. Meanwhile, human leaders continued their studies of the Council. Every message, every decree, every action by the Council was analyzed for weakness or opportunity. Humans mapped the political relationships among Council members, studied historical disputes, and observed how different species reacted to restrictions. They discovered patterns and used them to predict how the Council might respond to future human moves. By the time the Council realized that humans were active, humanity would already be several steps ahead, ready to act decisively without showing desperation or anger. Trade, science, and fleet coordination were joined by cultural preparation. Humans told stories of cleverness, resourcefulness, and resilience. Children learned about history, problem-solving, and teamwork. Communities discussed creative solutions and shared ideas about overcoming challenges. Humans were strengthening their society's ability to act collectively, not with force, but with intelligence and coordination. Every member of the species became part of a quiet, invisible network of preparation that extended across planets and colonies. One of the most remarkable aspects of this preparation was that it required no violence, no threats, and no complaints. Humans were acting not because they wanted revenge or to prove a point, but because they valued their independence and future. They knew that anger and panic would not help. Instead, they relied on intelligence, collaboration, and foresight. Their quiet, steady actions became the true demonstration of strength, far more powerful than any loud confrontation could have been. Even minor actions contributed. Engineers reinforced critical structures. Pilots practiced maneuvers. Scientists improved communication systems, and colonies maintained efficient operations. All of these small steps combined to create a web of readiness that extended across space. The Council assumed they had cornered humanity, that their restrictions had slowed human progress. But humans had only shifted gears, working quietly and efficiently, ready for the moment when the world would notice the results. Communication was at the heart of this preparation. Humans used encrypted networks that were impossible for outsiders to detect. These networks allowed real-time coordination between fleets, colonies, and Earth. Information about trade, resources, and strategic opportunities flowed quickly and securely. Humans had transformed ordinary communication into a powerful tool of preparation. It was invisible to the Council, but it strengthened human capabilities across the galaxy. By the end of this phase, humans had quietly established an unprecedented level of coordination, intelligence, and readiness. No single Council member could have predicted it. No species under the Council's rule could have imagined it. Humanity's patience, discipline, and ingenuity had created a foundation that would allow them to act with precision and impact. When the time came, every citizen, whether aware of the strategy or not, had played a part. Every colony, every ship, every engineer, pilot, and scientist had contributed to a quiet movement that no one outside their network could see. Humans had turned restriction into opportunity, unfair treatment into preparation, and underestimation into advantage. Their calm, patient, and intelligent approach made them stronger, more capable, and more united than ever before. The Council still believed humans were under control, still believed their restrictions were effective. They could not see the invisible network growing across the stars. They could not see the careful planning, the coordinated communication, the strengthened colonies, and the prepared fleets. They had assumed humans would act with panic, anger, or frustration, but instead, humans had acted with intelligence, strategy, and unity. And that was why the coming moments would surprise the galaxy. Humans had not reacted emotionally to the Council's restrictions. They had not complained or demanded immediate change. Instead, they had focused on preparation, coordination, and intelligence. They had built strength quietly, invisibly, and efficiently, preparing for the moment when they would have the freedom to act on their own terms. That moment was coming. The galaxy might not yet realize it, but humans were ready. By the time the Council finally recognized the extent of human activity, it would be too late to reverse it. Every trade route, every fleet, every colony, every communication line, every strategy, and every resource had been quietly prepared. Humans had not responded with anger or confrontation. They had responded with intelligence, focus, and unity. And this would allow them to achieve their goals with minimal resistance, maximum efficiency, and without giving the. By the time humanity had quietly strengthened its networks and fleets, the Council still believed it had control. They watched the usual trade routes, monitored known communication channels, and assumed that their restrictions were effective. But humans had already shifted to invisible paths, secret networks, and hidden plans. It was time to move beyond preparation. It was time for action, not in anger, not in reckless defiance, but in the steady, clever way humans had always acted when challenged. The first movements were subtle. Human trade ships began using the alternative routes that had been carefully prepared. At first, the change was almost imperceptible. Ships arrived slightly earlier than expected, carrying supplies to colonies that the Council assumed were struggling. Communication messages flowed faster, more securely, and with more coordination than ever before. Outsiders who tried to watch human activity noticed nothing unusual. To the Council, everything appeared routine. But every shipment, every message, every fleet movement was carefully coordinated to maximize efficiency and maintain independence. Humans had turned restriction into opportunity. Next, small exploratory teams moved into areas the Council had declared off limits. Scientists, engineers, and pilots traveled quietly, studying new sectors, mapping trade routes, and learning about resources. They sent their findings back through encrypted channels, where planners in Earth and the colonies could analyze the information. It was not a show of power or a threat. It was intelligence gathering knowledge that would allow humans to act faster, smarter, and more effectively than any other species. Each team knew their role, their objectives, and the importance of precision. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was left to chance. As humans acted quietly, leadership teams coordinated behind the scenes. Every fleet, every colony, and every station followed detailed schedules and contingency plans. No single point of failure could stop the operation. Humans had created redundancy in every system. If one route was blocked, another was ready. If one fleet encountered a problem, another fleet could assist without delay. It was a level of preparation that few species could achieve, and it relied on intelligence, patience, and trust. Humans had always been able to combine these qualities in ways that others could not predict. One of the most important aspects of this stage was communication. Humans used networks invisible to the Council, ensuring that every fleet and colony could share information securely and quickly. Pilots could adjust their course in real time. Engineers could repair critical systems remotely, and traders could reroute shipments without interruption. The Council had assumed distance would slow humans down, but the opposite was true. Humans had created a web of coordination that connected them across light years, making restriction ineffective. The Council began to notice small anomalies. Some trade routes appeared more efficient than expected. Supplies arrived in places that should have faced delays. Communication channels showed patterns the Council did not understand. A few Council members suggested investigating, but most assumed these were minor errors or coincidences. They did not realize that humans were deliberately creating advantages while appearing compliant. Humans had mastered the art of quiet action, and it was beginning to show results. Colonies played a crucial role. Leaders in distant settlements carried out orders with care and precision. They maintained daily operations to avoid suspicion, but also reinforced critical systems, monitored trade routes, and tested backup plans. Every colony contributed to the overall strategy, and every citizen participated indirectly by maintaining efficiency, readiness, and focus. Humans had a way of turning ordinary work into a network of preparation, and the result was a silent, coordinated effort that the Council could not detect. Meanwhile, fleets practiced maneuvers in ways that had never been done before. Pilots learned how to move multiple ships in perfect formation, coordinate speed and timing across light years, and adapt quickly to changing conditions. Engineers upgraded navigation systems and ship capabilities, ensuring that every vessel could operate under pressure. These preparations were subtle, efficient, and invisible to outsiders, but they created a level of coordination that no other species could match. Humans were ready to act, not recklessly, but with precision. Scientists worked quietly on communication systems that could transmit encrypted data faster than ever. Engineers upgraded existing fleets, integrating new technology into older ships. Trade leaders coordinated shipments to maximize efficiency and minimize exposure. Everyone had a role, and everyone understood their importance. Humans had taken the restrictions imposed by the Council and turned them into an opportunity to become stronger, smarter, and more prepared than ever before. Cultural preparation also continued. Humans emphasized lessons of focus, patience, and cleverness. Children were taught about problem-solving and teamwork. Communities shared stories of historical challenges and how humans had overcome them. Ordinary citizens, even unaware of the larger strategy, strengthened their society by maintaining discipline, intelligence, and unity. Humans were building more than technology. They were building a society capable of acting collectively with precision and purpose. At this point, humanity's quiet actions began to have visible effects. Some colonies experienced unexpected efficiency in trade and logistics. Supplies arrived on schedule, sometimes ahead of plan. Communication improved across sectors, allowing decisions to be made faster and more accurately. The Council could not figure out why these anomalies occurred. To them, everything seemed normal. They had no idea that humans were quietly operating a network of intelligence, preparation, and coordination that stretched across the galaxy. Human leaders maintained focus on the long-term objective. There was no rush, no anger, no impulsive reaction. Every step was part of a carefully calculated plan. Leadership teams analyzed data from every colony, fleet, and trade route, identifying opportunities to improve efficiency and strengthen independence. Contingency plans were updated continuously, ensuring that no unexpected event could derail progress. Humans had a way of preparing for the unexpected while making it look effortless. Fleets continued exercises, moving in formations that allowed maximum flexibility. Pilots learned to adapt quickly. Engineers tested every system, and communication networks ensured everyone remained connected. Colonies monitored their surroundings, reporting anomalies and adjusting operations quietly. The entire human network operated like a single organism, efficient, adaptive, and coordinated. The Council had underestimated human patience and intelligence, and that underestimation would soon have consequences. Trade networks became increasingly resilient. Human merchants used secret routes to deliver supplies while avoiding Council oversight. These routes were supported by hidden communication channels and contingency plans. Even when small disruptions occurred, alternative paths ensured that supplies arrived on time. Humans were not breaking rules aggressively. They were simply outsmarting the restrictions while maintaining efficiency. It was a quiet demonstration of skill, strategy, and intelligence. Humanity's cultural approach also played a role. Communities emphasized problem-solving, teamwork, and resilience. Education reinforced these values, ensuring that everyone understood the importance of focus, patience, and careful planning. By strengthening society from within, humans ensured that every individual could contribute to the larger goal. The Council assumed they could limit human activity, but humans had already built a system that extended beyond physical restrictions into society itself. As the weeks progressed, humans continued subtle movements. Trade continued, fleets exercised, colonies reinforced systems, and communication remained secure. The Council noticed only minor anomalies, but assumed they were insignificant. They had no idea that humans were quietly operating at peak efficiency, turning restriction into advantage, and preparing to demonstrate capability when the time came. Every action was deliberate, coordinated, and invisible, building strength without confrontation. By the end of this phase, humanity had quietly achieved something extraordinary. Fleets were coordinated, colonies were prepared, communication networks were secure, and trade networks were resilient. Humans had acted without aggression, without anger, and without giving the Council any visible signs of defiance. They had transformed restriction into preparation, building strength, intelligence, and coordination that no other species could match. The Council believed they had slowed humanity down, but humans had simply prepared to move faster and smarter than ever before. The galaxy was on the edge of noticing. Small anomalies, invisible to most, hinted at human activity. Those who watched carefully could see efficiency, coordination, and planning in human operations. The Council still believed it controlled the situation, but in reality, humans had created the foundation for action that would soon change the balance. Humanity had not reacted with anger. They had reacted with intelligence, preparation, and unity. And that reaction would shape the future. Humans were ready to show the galaxy that restriction could not limit them, that patience and strategy could overcome even the most powerful authority. They had acted quietly, effectively, and without confrontation. The Council assumed humanity was still compliant. They had no idea that the moment had finally arrived. After months of quiet preparation, humanity was ready to take its first major steps in response to the Council's restrictions. These actions would not be loud or reckless. Humans had learned over centuries that careful, intelligent decisions were far more effective than anger or haste. Every step taken would demonstrate not just capability, but control, unity, and wisdom, the qualities that had always set humanity apart. The first visible sign of change came through trade. Colonies and independent stations, long dependent on human supply lines, began receiving shipments faster than anyone expected. Goods and resources arrived not just on time, but in quantities that exceeded the immediate demand. Some Council members noticed this and assumed it was luck or coincidence. They did not realize that humans had optimized every route, every shipment, and every schedule. Even restrictions designed to slow human operations were circumvented quietly and efficiently. Humanity was showing that they could operate freely without breaking any rules openly. Fleets also began to move in ways that surprised observers. Ships traveled in coordinated patterns that seemed ordinary at first glance, but were designed for maximum efficiency and readiness. Pilots maneuvered as if every ship was connected by an invisible network, reacting instantly to changes without errors. Engineers monitored systems in real time, correcting minor problems before they could affect performance. Humans had spent months practicing these precise movements, and now the results were visible. The council watched with confusion, unable to understand how humans were operating so smoothly, despite the restrictions. At the same time, human scientists and explorers began sharing new discoveries with the colonies on Earth. Data that had been collected quietly over months was now being distributed through secure channels. Information about hidden resources, safe travel paths, and technological improvements flowed freely to those who needed it. What appeared to outsiders as routine updates were actually a demonstration of human intelligence and coordination. Every decision, every adjustment, every improvement was part of a larger picture that only humans fully understood. The council attempted to respond. They sent observers, tried to monitor trade routes more closely, and increased scrutiny on fleets and colonies. They assumed they could control the situation by applying pressure. But humans were already several steps ahead. Alternative routes, hidden communication channels, and secure networks ensured that the council's efforts had little effect. Humans had turned every restriction into an opportunity to prove efficiency and cleverness. While the council focused on monitoring, humans quietly strengthened their position further. Meanwhile, colonies became active participants in this subtle shift. Leaders of distant settlements coordinated with Earth and each other, ensuring that every system operated smoothly. Maintenance teams reinforced critical infrastructure. Engineers upgraded outdated technology, and traders optimized shipments. Citizens, even those unaware of the larger plan, contributed through focus and efficiency. Human society had a way of making every individual part of a collective effort. And now it was paying off in ways the council could not see. One of the most remarkable aspects at this stage was how humans demonstrated influence without aggression. They did not challenge the council openly, they did not make threats, and they did not engage in public disputes. Instead, every action was subtle, precise, and purposeful. By showing efficiency, intelligence, and reliability, humans gained trust and admiration from other species who had previously been skeptical of Earth. Slowly, without anyone noticing immediately, humans were shifting the balance of influence in the galaxy. The council began to notice cracks in their authority. Some species that had relied on the council's decisions began to question them. Humans had shown that even under restrictions, they could operate effectively and reliably. Other civilizations started to see that the council's rules were not absolute, and that collaboration with humans could bring advantages. This quiet shift in perception was perhaps more important than any physical demonstration. Influence had begun to move toward humanity without a single battle being fought. As trade, exploration, and fleet operations expanded, human leaders continued to coordinate with precision. Every step was calculated to maximize impact without breaking formal rules. Engineers monitored fleets, scientists shared information, and fleet commanders coordinated maneuvers across sectors. Every colony followed plans carefully, ensuring that all operations aligned with Earth's broader objectives. The result was a galaxy-wide demonstration of coordination, intelligence, and efficiency that surprised many observers. Humanity also demonstrated adaptability. When a planned route or shipment encountered an unexpected obstacle, alternative paths were used seamlessly. Contingency plans, practiced and prepared in advance, ensured no disruption could affect the overall strategy. Humans had transformed potential setbacks into opportunities to demonstrate cleverness and resilience. Every movement was a message. Restrictions might slow others, but humans could adapt, improve, and continue forward without hesitation. Communication remained a key element. Humans shared updates in real time across fleets and colonies, ensuring decisions were informed, fast, and accurate. Pilots could adjust routes instantly. Engineers could respond to technical problems immediately, and traders could reroute supplies without delay. These invisible networks were the backbone of human strategy, allowing the species to act as a single, coordinated entity across light years. To the Council, it appeared that humans were operating normally, but in reality, they were executing a plan that required intelligence, precision, and unity. Meanwhile, the cultural impact became visible. Humans had always valued problem-solving, collaboration, and adaptability. In schools, in workplaces, and in communities, these values were reinforced. Citizens learned to contribute to collective goals, to anticipate challenges, and to solve problems creatively. Even ordinary actions, like maintaining infrastructure or improving communication lines, became part of a larger strategic effort. Humanity was proving that collective intelligence and unity could achieve what brute force alone could not. Small successes in trade and fleet operations began to accumulate. Supplies arrived ahead of schedule, fleets operated efficiently, and colonies maintained stability even under scrutiny. Other species started to notice the difference. Observers reported that human operations were unusually reliable, well-coordinated, and effective despite the Council's restrictions. Some species began to admire the discipline, intelligence, and organization demonstrated by humans. Quietly, humanity was building influence across the galaxy without confrontation. By this stage, humanity had achieved something extraordinary. They had acted without aggression, without rebellion, and without violating rules. Instead, they had used intelligence, preparation, coordination, and adaptability to demonstrate capability. The Council, which had assumed that restriction would limit human activity, was now confronted with the reality that humans had grown stronger, smarter, and more influential despite their attempts to control them. The first visible signs of true influence began to appear. Some colonies gained access to new resources. Trade partners started collaborating more closely, and fleets demonstrated operational efficiency beyond expectations. All of this occurred without anger, threats, or conflict. Humans had shown that intelligence, unity, and preparation could achieve what aggression could not. They had acted carefully, deliberately, and effectively, proving that they could operate freely, even under restriction. The Council began to worry. Their assumptions about human behavior had been wrong at every step. They had expected frustration, chaos, or defiance. Instead, humans had responded with patience, intelligence, and preparation. The Council had underestimated human capability, focus, and unity. Small signs of human influence began to appear in political discussions among other species. Some started to question the Council's authority and policies. Humans had not just survived restrictions, they had quietly expanded their influence and demonstrated their ability to adapt and lead. Human leaders continued to coordinate operations with precision. Every fleet movement, every trade route, and every colony operation was carefully monitored and adjusted to maximize impact. Engineers ensured all systems functioned efficiently. Pilots practiced maneuvers constantly. Scientists shared discoveries quickly and securely. Every action contributed to a larger, coherent strategy that strengthened human influence and independence across the galaxy. By the end of this stage, humanity had quietly achieved its first major success against the Council's restrictions. They had demonstrated efficiency, intelligence, coordination, and resilience. They had operated without aggression, maintained control over operations, and quietly built influence. Other species began to notice, the Council began to worry, and the galaxy slowly started to realize that humans were no longer just another species. They were forced to be respected. The first step of action had shown that humans could respond to unfair treatment without anger, chaos, or conflict. They had prepared, planned, coordinated, and executed with intelligence and unity. Influence had shifted subtly but powerfully. Trade, exploration, and fleet operations had all demonstrated human capacity. Humanity had spent months quietly preparing, planning, and strengthening itself across every corner of the galaxy. The Council had assumed that restricting humans would slow them down, make them dependent, or cause them to submit. Instead, humans had turned every limitation into an opportunity. They had improved fleets, strengthened trade networks, optimized communication, and built resilience in colonies. Now, it was time for the final step, to show the galaxy and the Council that humans could not be underestimated. The first sign of this new phase appeared in the colonies. Supplies arrived ahead of schedule, even to the most distant settlements. Fleet operations coordinated perfectly, with no delays, no miscommunications, and no errors. What seemed like ordinary efficiency was actually a demonstration of human intelligence, preparation, and unity. Other species noticed, realizing that humans could achieve what they had been told was impossible under restriction. The Council, watching closely, grew uneasy that human leaders had planned every action carefully. Nothing was reckless. They were not seeking conflict. Their goal was influence, respect, and independence. Every movement, whether in trade, exploration, or fleet coordination, was a clear message. Humans could thrive even under pressure, and they would not be forced into submission. Every colony, every fleet, every citizen played a role, whether directly or indirectly. It was a collective effort that demonstrated the strength of humanity as a species. Trade became a powerful tool. Human merchants began creating partnerships with independent planets and smaller civilizations. By providing reliable goods, resources, and services, humans showed that they could operate efficiently without the Council's approval or interference. Other species, impressed by the organization and reliability of humans, began seeking their collaboration. Slowly but surely, human influence spread across the galaxy. It was not enforced. It was earned. Humans had learned that the most lasting power comes from respect and cooperation, not intimidation or aggression. Fleets continued to demonstrate efficiency and precision. Ships moved in coordinated patterns that could adapt to any situation, showing agility and readiness. Pilots and engineers worked seamlessly together, responding to minor changes or unexpected obstacles without panic. Every action was rehearsed, calculated, and deliberate, but it appeared effortless. To the Council, it was confusing. How could humans operate with such precision under restrictions they had imposed? The answer was simple: preparation, intelligence, and unity. Meanwhile, humans continued to explore new sectors quietly. Teams traveled to areas the Council had assumed were inaccessible, mapping resources, trade opportunities, and safe travel paths. Information was shared securely with colonies and Earth, allowing planners to make intelligent decisions. Every step built human capability and influence, but without threatening other species. Humans had turned exploration into a way to strengthen independence and demonstrate competence. The Council tried to respond. They attempted to monitor fleets more closely, imposed stricter trade restrictions, and sent observers to human colonies. But every attempt failed. Humans had already created alternative routes, secure communication networks, and contingency plans. The Council could only watch as humans adapted, overcame obstacles, and continued to grow stronger. Every action by humans seemed ordinary on the surface, But beneath it lay months of careful preparation and intelligence. In addition to trade, fleets, and exploration, humans strengthened cultural influence. Stories of resourcefulness, patience, and teamwork spread across colonies. Communities emphasized problem-solving, cooperation, and creativity. Citizens of all ages were engaged in contributing to the larger human effort. Even when unaware of the full scope, their actions maintaining infrastructure, assisting neighbors, learning new skills added to the collective strength. Humanity was showing that power comes not only from technology and fleets, but from society itself. One of the most remarkable aspects of this stage was how humans influenced other species. Planets that had once relied on the Council's guidance began to turn to humans for advice, collaboration, and trade. They admired the efficiency, intelligence, and unity humans demonstrated. Humans had achieved influence not through confrontation, but through competence, reliability, and preparation. Slowly, the perception of humanity shifted from unpredictable and emotional to capable, intelligent, and worthy of respect. The Council grew increasingly concerned. They realized that their restrictions had failed. Humans were thriving despite limitations, and their influence was spreading. Some members debated revising the restrictions, but by then it was too late. Humans had created redundancy, coordination, and capability that could not be undone. The Council had underestimated patience, intelligence, and unity, the very qualities that defined humanity. Trade networks, fleets, and communication lines were now operating at peak efficiency. Colonies had complete confidence in their systems, knowing that supplies, data, and assistance would arrive when needed. Humans had transformed restrictions into opportunities for improvement. Every challenge the Council had imposed became a reason to grow stronger. By acting calmly, intelligently, and collectively, humans had turned a potential weakness into unmatched advantage. Exploration teams returned with data that allowed humans to expand influence even further. Resources previously considered inaccessible were now mapped and ready for use. Trade and supply routes could now reach more distant systems, increasing efficiency and reliability. Humans had not violated rules. They had simply used intelligence, preparation, and adaptability to maximize every opportunity. The galaxy began to notice, and whispers of admiration spread among other species. Human fleets demonstrated their capability in quiet, non-aggressive ways. Ships moved with perfect coordination, responding instantly to changes. Engineers ensured systems operated efficiently, and pilots maneuvered with precision. The Council had assumed that restrictions would slow human expansion, but humans had turned preparation into advantage. Every movement, every action, every operation demonstrated efficiency, intelligence, and unity. The result was influence without confrontation, a power the Council could not comprehend. As influence grew, humans began to take subtle leadership in the galaxy. Planets and colonies sought collaboration, relying on human organization and expertise. Humans provided solutions, coordinated trade, and shared knowledge. They had earned influence not by force, but through reliability, intelligence, and preparation. Slowly, the galaxy began to see humanity not as a subordinate species, but as a capable, respected leader. Finally, the Council realized the truth. Humans had never been controlled. Restrictions had not limited them. They had strengthened them. The species that others had underestimated had proven intelligence, unity, patience, and capability far beyond expectations. The Council had thought they were punishing humans, but in reality, humans had quietly built influence, independence, and readiness across the galaxy. The power of humanity lay not in aggression or intimidation, but in preparation, intelligence, and unity. By the end of this stage, humanity had achieved something extraordinary. They had demonstrated capability, influence, and resilience without breaking rules or resorting to conflict. Trade networks, fleets, colonies, and communication systems all operated efficiently, coordinated, and securely. Humans had shown the galaxy that restrictions could not limit them, that patience and preparation could overcome even the most powerful authority. Influence had shifted in subtle but undeniable ways. Humanity had turned restriction into opportunity, underestimation into strength, and calm into unstoppable progress. The galaxy had seen the beginning of a new chapter 1 in which humans were respected, influential, and capable of acting with intelligence and unity. The Council had misjudged them, and the lesson was clear. Humans were never predictable, and when treated unfairly, they prepared, adapted, and rose with remarkable efficiency and wisdom. The final message humanity sent was simple but powerful. Without confrontation, without aggression, without breaking rules, they had proven that they could thrive, influence, and lead. The galaxy learned that human strength lay not in weapons or anger, but in intelligence, preparation, and unity. Every citizen, every colony, every fleet had played a role in this success. Humanity had not only survived restrictions, they had transformed them into opportunity. And in doing so, they had reshaped the balance of power across the stars. The Council, and indeed the galaxy, would never underestimate humans again. They had acted with patience, intelligence, and coordination that no other species could match. Humanity had turned unfair treatment into a demonstration of capability, proving that restrictions could not limit them. Influence, respect, and leadership had been quietly earned, and the galaxy would now see humans not as subordinate, but as equals and in many ways. As leaders capable of shaping the future, humans had achieved their goal. They had acted without anger, without aggression, and without conflict. They had shown intelligence, preparation, and unity, and the results spoke for themselves. The Council had miscalculated, and the galaxy had noticed. Humanity had proven that the true power of a species lay in its ability to plan, adapt, and act together, even under the most challenging circumstances.